So my name is Jimena, like I said, and I work at the CIMAR. The CIMAR is an institute in Costa Rica, and I'm going to tell you a bit of the work that I've been doing following my PhD and settling back into Costa Rica, where I'm from, in collaboration with Brigitte Van Tussenbroek and Jorge Cortés. So just in case you don't know where Costa Rica is, because we're quite far away, I get it. Costa Rica is a small country in Central America, so it's a bit further out. And we have two sides where we could find seagrasses. So we have the Caribbean side, the Caribbean coast, and then the Pacific coast. And in some of the seagrass maps worldwide, we actually find that there aren't any seagrasses depicted on our Pacific side. But we know that that isn't the case. We have historical records from collections from a while back, but we also have some more recent reports, some in El Salvador, Nicaragua, and now ours in Costa Rica as well. So we know that we have seagrasses. And just to let you know a little bit more about Costa Rica, so we have very high mountains for us, very high mountains and volcanoes and everything in the center. And so the Caribbean coast, it's very well divided into the two coasts. So the Caribbean coast, we have a very small tidal range. It's only about 30 centimeters. And in that coast, the coastline is very, very straight. And you have reef lagoons here at the bottom. And at the top, it's mostly sandy beaches for sea turtle nesting because we don't have any reefs and it's more high energy. And it's very rainy. And then on the Pacific side, the systems are very different. There's a 3-meter tidal range, which means that there's more intrusion of saline intrusion. We have lots of bays and estuaries, and we don't find these reef lagoon systems where seagrasses could develop. So for us, that's two very different sort of types of places where you would find seagrasses, and we find that it is very different. So what we did was, when I got back, we did a full review of, okay, what do we know about our seagrasses? Because we didn't really know a lot of the current knowledge in that sense. And so we looked at all the published literature, but a lot of it is in gray literature, local journals, and in Spanish. So that has created a lot of the void as well. And then we looked at all of our herbarium samples. We have several herbariums. And then we looked at the samples that are overseas. Lots of people come, they collect, and then they leave. And so we had to go online databases and images and all this sort of stuff. And then, of course, we started doing field sampling. So whenever anybody came to us and told us, there's seagrass over there, okay, let's go see. Usually it's caulerpa, but it doesn't matter. And so the publication finally came out. It's in a local journal. It's open access, and it's in English. So at least you can go and have a look if you want. So seagrasses in Costa Rica, we've been studying them since about the 1960s, and the number of publications has been increasing steadily since about the 1960s. But mostly it's been studies on the Caribbean coast. So only more recently have there been more studies on the Pacific side. And so with the current taxonomic listing, this might change soon. We have 7 species reported for Costa Rica, 6 on the Caribbean side, and 4 species on the Pacific side. We have 3 species that we only find in the Caribbean side, so Thalassia, testudinum, Syringodium, filiforme, and the smaller Halophila decipiens, which goes a bit deeper. And then on both coasts, we have reports of Halophila baillonis, which is a clover grass, Ruppia maritima, and Halodule wrightii, or wrightii. And then we find one different type of Halodule in our Pacific, which might be wrightii. So it might be that we have one less species here and they're combined. But we only find that type of morphology on our Pacific side. So that's the one that's only on the Pacific. Now, seagrass research in Costa Rica hasn't gone in depth. It's basically taxonomic reports. It's a coral reef researchers going to the reef and saying, oh, there's also seagrass there. And it happens to be these species. That's pretty much it. We do have some ecological studies, and we do have some monitoring programs. And so there's growing work, but mostly it's taxonomic. And most of the work, because it's in the Caribbean, has been on these species, so Thalassia, testudinum, and Syringodium filiforme. And so it's a bit focused on those. So our Caribbean seagrasses are typical Caribbean seagrasses. This is sort of what they look like. They're dominated by this large species. We have about 10 locations, which sum up to about 36 hectares, and they go up to 8 meters depth. And so we know when they reproduce, we know their biomass, we know a little bit more about them. And because of the very rainy and high energy system here, they're located here in the southern Caribbean. And so because of the monitoring program and the work that Brigitte did with the CARICOM monitoring program Caribbean-wide, we know that there have been changes in the community. So they have been changing, and we don't know if it's completely due to anthropogenic stress or not. We do know that more recently there's been even more changes in the system. So we've gone from seagrass dominated to very sparse seagrass and even seagrass loss in a lot of locations. And so we're currently working a lot more on that. And we're looking at nutrients, water quality, grazing exclusion experiments, and all this sort of stuff. So there's a lot of work currently in process. Now, up to 2001, this was the map of seagrasses on our Pacific coast. Three points, basically. One of them was this meadow up in Bahia Culebra, which is, this is what it looks like. It's mostly Ruppia, and it was about 5,000 square meters. The other two reports were actually researchers saying, I saw seagrass there. That's it. That was our map up to 2001. And what happened was that they found that meadow in 1994, and in 1996 it disappeared. There was a very big storm, and it was lots of waves, lots of rain, very turbid event. And so the seagrasses disappeared, and they haven't come back. We've gone and looked. Even last month we went. They haven't come back. There hasn't been any recovery. So when that happened, basically, we don't have any seagrasses on our Pacific coast. And so nobody was even looking. Now what happened? In 2010, we started getting a lot of reports about seagrasses in our southern Pacific in Golfo Dulce. So it's down here in the southern. This is a very protected embayment. It's very deep in the middle, and it's shallow only in the margin of it. And here we keep getting reports of these species, so Halodule wrightii or beaudettei, depending on who you speak to, and Halophila baillonis. And we have a very large meadow here, and then we've already published this work. And then everybody keeps telling us of all the different places that they see them, and then they don't see them, and then they see them again, and we've gone out and verified them and have the samples and are doing spatial variability and isotopes and all this sort of stuff. But the thing is that there's a lot of locations with seagrass. And when I ask the local people, have they always been there, they tell me that green fuzz has always been there. And we are the ones that haven't been finding it, I guess. So it's more of a research question. Have they been there for how long? And that's what we're working on at the moment, trying to figure that out. So because we actively went out and searched and all this different analysis, we found 21, well now I've updated it, it's actually 23 locations at the moment with seagrass on our Pacific coast. And most of the reports, or a lot of them, are actually new reports in the last couple of years. So the question is, are we finding more because there are more, or are we finding more because we're looking for them? But what we do know is that we have approximately 97 hectares of seagrass on our Pacific side, so that's more seagrass than we have on our Caribbean side. We just don't know a lot about them. We do know that the sea turtles are eating them from stomach content analysis and stable isotope work that we've been doing. So there is a faunal interaction, same as we have in the Caribbean with our sea turtles and manatees as well. And so the take-home message, and basically what this publication says, is that they're very different. So our Caribbean seagrasses are big, large, persistent meadows that you always go, you find them. They're a bit shallower, easier to see. And then the ones on our Pacific side are actually more dynamic. They come, they go. They can be very low densities. They can be a lot deeper in murkier waters, covered by sediment. And so it's not as easy to find them if you have to go a bit deeper, and they're only very small species that come and go. And so that has a lot of implications, at least for us. Costa Rica is a country that prides itself on how much of our country we protect, and we do a lot of conservation. But that has not applied to the marine systems as much as it has in the terrestrial systems, and we're trying to change that. Now, on our Caribbean side, our seagrass meadows, most of them are protected. They're in national parks and national reserves, and there's a lot of active management going on. On our Pacific side, that's not the case. A lot of them are actually in areas that are very turbid, very murky, lots of nutrient input, sedimentation, and so we're not sure how much is natural dynamics and how much is impacts. And so that's another thing that we're currently working on in trying to figure out the natural dynamics so that we can separate that from the stressors and the impacts. And just one last thing. Well, I wanted to thank everybody in the funding and everybody that helped. But one last thing, taking into account the theme of the conference, is that because the Pacific side, we're looking for seagrass. We've done a lot of workshops with local stakeholders, teaching them about seagrass. We've developed a guide of Costa Rican seagrasses, which you can download online, and we give them out, and they're really interested. And it's become a two-way conversation. And a lot of the locations that are on the map, it's because local fishermen, tour guides, they call us, they say, oh, we found them, they send us pictures. And so it's become a collaborative effort. And in that sense, we do think that this combination of the science and the local stakeholder participation in the science has taken off well on our Pacific coast. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you for your time. Questions?
Nice talk. I may have missed it, but what are the main stresses on the Pacific coast, and how different are they to the actual Caribbean coast?
Well, our main stressors are coastal development and agriculture, both sides. So there's a lot of bananas and a lot of pineapple and a lot of rice and melon and all these different crops that are being grown very extensively. But there's also a lot of coastal development for tourism, and that leads to a lot of erosion and a lot of more nutrients going into the water than they should be. Yeah.
Maybe some historical aerial photography could help you in learning about previous seagrasses on the Pacific coast.
Mm-hmm, we agree. Our challenge with that is that a lot of the water is very murky. It's very turbid water. And they're a bit further, like deeper, so 4, 5, 6, up to like 8 meters. So that isn't as easy in murky water. And we also find that they're very low density. So some of the pictures here are very nice in clear water and very dense patches, but a lot of the time you have 5% cover, 10% cover of a small species, 8 meters depth in murky water. So those are our challenges. But we do have periods of time when it clears up, and also times when they're exposed. So we can definitely work on that.
Hello, Jimena. I was wondering, turtles, might they play a role in the beds disappearing and appearing again in the Pacific? Have you seen any turtle grazing actually yourself and see what they actually do to the seagrass meadow?
No, we see the sea turtles on either coast. We see them all the time. The turtle people, actually, some of the ones that come to us or came to us the most and said, oh, there's seagrass there, we see it and everything. And they actually, the biggest meadow, they called it Turtle Bay. So there's high densities of seagrass around where there's high densities of sea turtles. How much they're affecting it, whether they're overgrazing it on the Pacific, we have no idea. So we're working on it slowly. And on our Caribbean side, we do see overgrazing, and that's one of the things that we're working on, putting out the exclusion cages for the mega herbivores. So one of the challenges with the ones on the Pacific, though, with putting cages and all that sort of stuff out, is that the sediment is a lot finer. It's not as consolidated as the Caribbean meadows. So that's a challenge even for putting out different things like light measurements and things like that. Okay, so now we have to move on.